bacteria, and then all of a sudden it's very unsafe for us to eat because you eat it, you ingest it, and then all of a sudden you've got some pretty nasty pathogens in your stomach. So, and then if the sneeze picture didn't convince you, I hope this slide will. You really need a good, strong mucosal immune system because some of the most devastating diseases in the world will attack you through those mucosal layers. So first and foremost would be acute respiratory infections. It's just a fancy term for things like flu, things that infect you through your airways. And then the other big one is HIV, which kills millions of people worldwide. And that is another disease that passes through the urogenital tract and gets into your body that way. Also mentioned earlier in the talk were things like measles, hepatitis B, whooping cough. They're still fairly dangerous diseases that, again, all pass through the airways or the digestive tract. So what does your body do about that? Well, it turns out that you have millions upon billions of immune cells just waiting right behind the mucosal tissues, ready to protect you. So if you let's take a look at the gut. So if you take a look at the intestine, and we're going to zoom in on this little part right here of the body, and look at what the cells are actually doing in there. So if you imagine this top part of the slide is the inside of the gut. And what I mean by that is if you've got this tube that's your intestine, you can think of it like a big hose. The inside of that tube is where all the food goes, and that's what I mean by the inside of the gut. And so that's right up here. Then there is the gut wall, which would be the circular part right here, and these are all comprised of your own human cells. And so that is right here. And you'll notice that right there, pretty much inside the wall, and then right behind the wall, are your T and B cells. And as Rakina mentioned, these are very important cells for your immune system. And I'll show you in a second with a better picture, but they are just waiting to protect you. And they actually do a phenomenal job of that every day of your lives. So here's a real picture, and I apologize if it's not showing up as bright or as clear as it could be. Maybe we could, yeah, thank you, Jedidah. We're gonna turn the lights off here. So here we have the same situation as before. We have the inside of the gut. Here's where your food passes through as it's being digested. And then here you have your gut wall of the cells. Actually, you know what, maybe we should take a step back here. So the previous picture you'll note was a drawing, a cartoon. This is now an actual picture of somebody's gut. So I believe what we did here is scientists took a mouse, and the poor fellow was very agreeable and allowed us to take a picture of his intestines. And so what we did was take a little tiny piece of his intestines, stained or dyed it with special chemicals and proteins that then made all of the cells shine very brightly. So these are actually fluorescent. So we took a UV light and made everything glow. I say that because I don't want you to get the impression that your guts are actually bright green and red. They're actually, just pretty gross looking, like you would expect them. Anyway, so we have a real picture here, and you've got the gut wall cells right up here. These are big, long finger-like projections, and that's what allows you to absorb all these nutrients and food. You've got all of these fingers in your gut, and they're the ones that are bringing in all the goodies from your salad. These little smaller green and red dots, though, is just this army of immune cells waiting and poised, like I said before, ready to protect you. So here's a repeat of Rakina's slide. The army of cells in the previous slide, they were mostly B cells. And what these B cells do, they secrete these proteins called antibodies. The antibodies bind the microbes and keep you from getting sick. So why do we really care about the mucosal immune system? What we as scientists are interested in doing are making vaccines better. So you'll note that vaccines today involve an injection typically into your arm. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but today's vaccines with the injections aren't too great. So what actually happens quite often is that the people giving you the shot can actually end up hurting themselves. And so approximately 30 to 50 million people every year hurt themselves by giving injections. And so what we would really like as immunologists is to develop a vaccine that doesn't require a needle. And the other big thing about today's vaccines that aren't so great is that they're very expensive and they take a lot of time to make. So that seasonal flu vaccine that you get every year, it actually requires, every shot that you get requires 1 or 2 chicken eggs. Why chicken eggs? Well, what this researcher is doing is they're taking little bits of the flu, injecting it into the chicken egg, and then using the chicken egg like an oven that just cooks up and makes a lot more flu virus. And once you have a lot more flu virus, then you've got a lot of material to work with, and you can make a lot of vaccines. But imagine, there are, 300 million people in America, there are several billion people worldwide. That's a lot of chickens, that's a lot of chicken eggs, and that's a lot of time to make this vaccine. So what happens, let's say worst case scenario, and you need a lot of vaccines fast, this isn't going to cut it. That's going to take way too long, and far too many lives are going to be lost. So we need a better way than needles, we need a better way than chicken eggs. I mean, this is the 21st century, people. What are we still doing messing around with these guys? The final thing that's wrong with today's vaccines is that they require refrigeration. Now, we take it for granted. We've got electricity and refrigerators everywhere. But in other parts of the world where these vaccines are desperately needed, they don't necessarily have refrigeration all the time. And so the other thing that we want to do is to make sure that we develop a vaccine that you can just store sitting on the shelf at room temperature, and it'll work forever. Finally, nobody likes getting a shot. I certainly don't, and I work with needles all the time. It's just not fun. I mean, come on, who wants to get a shot? So what can we do instead? Okay, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Quick review here. So you get a shot, you induce immunity or protection all throughout your circulation. All of those immune cells that are constantly flowing through your body, they're ready, they're protected, they're primed. However, I just spent all this time telling you about how oftentimes you'll get infected, not through your circulation, but through your mucosa, your mouth, your guts, that stuff. So no one wants to get a nose shot. That would be absolutely awful. So how do you get the vaccine and the protection from your blood into your mucosa? And that is the real challenge, and that's why we're trying to develop better vaccines. So how, you might ask? Why don't we eat our vaccines? You get infected through your guts, why not get protected through your stomach? And that's exactly what researchers are working on right now. So I'll finish up with 2 relatively new studies of researchers actually developing plant-based edible vaccines. And so don't worry too much about the scientific titles here. I just wanted to show you that, yes, there are studies. The really cool thing about this one was that they grew rice, they turned it into a vaccine, and the really exciting thing about this first study was that even after 3 years of this rice just sitting at room temperature, they were then able, it still worked. Whereas today's vaccines wouldn't work after that amount of time. So 3 years is phenomenal, because that means we can make a lot of vaccine, store it, and then have it ready in case there's some kind of horrific outbreak. In case everybody on the face of the planet decides to get flu one day, then we'll have a lot of it already and ready to go. More realistically, people won't be getting flu. Truth of the matter is, we want a lot of vaccine on hand in case there is some kind of biochemical warfare. So in case somebody decides to do something very scary, and that is use diseases as weapons, we really want to be ready with a lot of vaccine on hand. And that's where this rice vaccine could really come in handy, because it's so stable. The second study I thought was very interesting. This one relied on potatoes. And what's interesting about this is that they did it in humans, it worked, it was safe, and they ended up inducing protection from the hepatitis B virus. I'll mention that, sorry, this first one used mice, lab mice, as a test subject, but we've gone beyond that, and we're now showing that you can do this and it works in humans, which is really who we care about. So I'll finish there, and I will take your questions. Rakina and Heather will take any questions that you may have. But that is pretty much the talk. You've all been wonderful. Thank you.
I have a question about your edible vaccines. That's so cool. Do you, the actual rice, like, is this rice that you have to plant and then grow?
Mm-hmm.
Or can you just take the rice and you can cook it and eat it, and even cook it?
So unfortunately, the food vaccines don't work if you cook it. So what that does is, just like how today's vaccines need to be refrigerated to keep them from going bad, if you were to cook it, that's what would make the vaccine go bad. So I don't think we'll ever have a vaccine that you can just eat, like a big plate of rice. What will most likely happen is they'll take the rice, they'll grind it up and put it into a pill. So swallowing a pill is still far better than getting a needle in the arm, but I don't think we're going to have, French fries, polio vaccine. I mean, who knows though? I mean, we've got a lot of time in the future, so maybe we can make it strong enough and stable enough that you could do that.
I have a question. So you mentioned how, like for instance, with the food vaccines, you can eat it and then does that mean that all of your mucosal surfaces are protected, or just your respiratory, just your surface? Like, what does that mean when you take the food-based vaccine?
Good question. So what is really cool about the mucosal immune system is that if you give a vaccine orally, and it goes through the digestive system, not only will the gastrointestinal tract be protected, but your respiratory tract will also be protected. Your mouth, the lacrimal glands, your tear ducts will be protected. Pretty much anything with a layer of mucus on it will be protected. And that's what's really nice about giving edible vaccines, is that you protect the rest of your body and not just the stomach. Yes?
I have a question. Do you think that they will ever make a vaccine for cancer?
So that's also a very active topic of research. So as a scientist, I would like to say yes, that you could vaccinate and protect against cancer.
At the moment, it's more like the other way. These are preventive vaccines because they prevent disease. But nowadays, people start to develop cancer and vaccines against autoimmune disease, and this will be more therapeutic. So you have a chronic disease there, and people try to change the balance in the immune system in a way that the cancer cells will be killed. So yes, there's a lot of research, but it's difficult there because you're using your own immune system, kind of. It's very tricky, but yeah, people do this. Not in a very
Now there's a lot of stories coming out. A lot of people coming out with cancer.
yes.
They should really work on making it.
No,
That's absolutely the goal. One of the biggest problems in that field, though, is that instead of your immune system attacking something foreign, a bacteria or a virus that you've been infected with, you need to teach it to attack yourself, and not your whole self, just the cancerous self. And so finding ways of tricking the immune system to do that is an active area of research.
And I think the main point is that we won't necessarily have a vaccine that protects you from cancer, that it will be something that you get once you have cancer. So it will be, like Rakina said, therapeutic. But I don't think we'll ever have something that completely keeps you from ever getting cancer, at least not in term of like a vaccine. You see what I'm saying?
Because sometimes the chemotherapy don't work.
Exactly.